All right, we're doing something a little different with this one. So in the One Punch Man remake, there's been this debate recently about whether or not we can trust what the character Drive Knight said in the most recent chapter. I started thinking about my own position on this, and I found it pretty interesting as an example of kind of how to look at a story and how to look at certain meta story elements to predict what you think will happen next and to better articulate what you hope will happen next. So I decided I'd dive into it and make this separate video about why, in the end, I do trust Drive Knight. So here's the basic situation. In the latest chapter of the remake, Drive Knight tells the Hero Association executive that Metal Knight is scheming to take over the world and an enemy of the Hero Association. So people seem to be pretty split on whether or not Drive Knight should be trusted on this issue. I gave it some thought myself. I think it is pretty interesting, as I said. And it's not just in terms of, as I said, evidence within the story, but trying to take a meta-analysis, taking a step back and putting yourself in the shoes of the authors and thinking about what stories are most likely to be told by them. So I'm going to color code what I think of as evidence for Metal Knight being the good guy of this situation, and for Drive Knight being the one that we should trust. I hope you enjoy this very slight visual aid because I'm not going to use any other for the rest of the video. By the way, there's no webcomic spoilers in this. I did close my parentheses. I'm actually just going to move this like this maybe for the time being. The web camera so it doesn't cover up bullet points. Yeah, so I definitely don't have any explicit spoilers for things that happen in the webcomic. But since we're on the subject of meta-narratives, you can infer from the fact that I'm still speculating about certain things that those things haven't happened either way in the webcomic already. So I guess very mild meta-spoilers in that regard. All right, so let's look at the evidence we have within the story. Drive Knight tells Genos that Metal Knight is his enemy at the end of the Boros arc. So this is the first kind of hint we have of this plot line coming in the future. So it seems like he's doing this out of concern for Genos. And it's very evident that the Drive Knight has researched this incident of the destructive cyborg that laid waste to Genos' hometown. And this, to me, suggests kind of a perspective of justice. Why would you be looking into this if you weren't trying to bring justice to those victims and stop this incident from repeating itself? Of course, though, Drive Knight could also know about this because he's actually the one responsible for the incident. So, I don't know. Metal Knight has some incidents in the past that suggest that he would be like a good villain. He would be hateable. He would be someone that you're eager to see taken down. During the Meteor arc, he was very callous about, oops, this should be just as an opportunity to test. I have no idea why I put attack. But yeah, he saw the Meteor primarily as an opportunity to test out his missiles. He didn't really seem to be concerned about how much damage it could do, who would live or die. He just wanted to see if he was strong enough to blow it up. During the hostage crisis that kind of kickstarts the whole Monster Association raid, his suggestion is just to bomb the thing to smithereens and forget the hostage. That's just one kid, which of course, a little callous. But if we're kind of taking this attitude, we could say that Drive Knight was also very similarly pragmatic. Just in this previous chapter, when he was explaining to the executive that he'd been monitoring the fight for quite a while to understand how Nyan's powers worked, allowing heroes to get hurt, allowing perhaps the hostage to be put at risk, just because he calculated that this was the best chance of him actually winning the fight. It kind of seems like Metal Knight's big pragmatic concern when he brings up these sorts of things about just wanting to become stronger or eliminating the Monster Association in the most kind of effective way, not really caring about the hostage. He's always concerned about kind of like a greater evil, that he wants to become powerful because he's still afraid of future threats. He just wants to focus on other priorities and things. So, yeah, I don't know. If that truly is his motivation for how he behaves, it could be somewhat forgivable. But even if these are good intentions, even if we can agree generally with what he's doing, it could still lead to a very villainous situation where he decides that he should own all the power in the world, he should be in charge of everything, and this, of course, is still unacceptable, and it leads to him being the major villain in an arc, and basically all of Drive Knight's prophecies coming to pass regardless. Okay, what else we got? So Drive Knight suggests that Metal Knight intentionally had his fighting drone captured by the Monster Association. So this would allow them to hack into the security systems at the Hero Association using the information embedded in that fighting drone. The MA raid is the perfect opportunity to do this because most of the heroes are either involved in the raid or hospitalized from previous attacks. And this would largely remove the Hero Association from Meta Knight's plan for world domination. It's just a major obstacle to having the monopoly of power, but it still allows Metal Knight to claim innocence and have plausible deniability. You know, like, oh shoot, what an unforeseen problem that they hacked into all these systems. And then he can still use the remaining Hero Association members and resources for the time being to continue advancing his plans. So this plan generally makes sense. If your goal was world domination and you saw the Hero Association as an obstacle to that, I think this is a pretty effective route to do so, a route befitting a genius such as Dr. Beaufoy. But there is no evidence that that is his goal, right? And this is something that I think a lot of people are pointing out, that Drive Knight offers no evidence to back up his claims. It does explain why Metal Knight so aggressively invaded the Monster Association with the battle drone. If you recall, it was during the Senior Centipede, the first encounter with him, when he started diving back underground. Metal Knight very quickly fastened his drone to it so he could see where the Monster Association headquarters was. Normally, he's very, very cautious about deploying this drone. As Drive Knight points out, it's his most precious piece of equipment, and it contains all of these security resources. But then again, he could have misjudged the Monster Association's strength. A lot of the top-ranking heroes felt extremely confident, probably way too overconfident about their matchup against the Monster Association. So maybe he just thought this would be the most effective way. I'll follow the Centipede in. I'll just take out everyone else. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Explains why Metal Knight would have spent so much effort making the Hero Association headquarters himself. Metal Knight usually seems a little indifferent to people's concerns and more focused on just accumulating his own power. Regardless, he still put a whole bunch of time and effort and resources into upgrading the Hero Association headquarters, just kind of out of the goodness of his heart. And I mean, there's also lots of other explanations for this, rather than just him setting up this grand scheme of sneaking back in there later. He could have been expected to do it by all the heroes. Maybe he genuinely did want to do it for the public good because he's a good guy. He's just a huge nerd and he loves building huge cannons. All of these things are just as possible. And when we see Drive Knight explain all of this, he very much avoids the question of proof. Or at least he seems to. When the executive asks, like, what do you have to actually back this up? What is your evidence? He just starts asking about Blast. And of course, as soon as you mention Blast, everyone's eyes are just so dazzled with stars and dreams and expectations and hopes that they're not going to be focusing on whether or not so-and-so proved such and such. But maybe he is just trying to focus, he's just trying to focus on resolving the problem ASAP. It seems that Drive Knight is very concerned that this raid on the Hero Association headquarters could be happening like immediately. He wants the executive to call in and raise this threat. He wants heroes redeployed to defend against it, and he's immediately exploring all of his options, like, could we get Blast involved in this? So, if Drive Knight is the traitor, it seems very likely that he'd be cooperating with the mysterious robot-deploying battlesuit building group called the Organization. If you don't remember these guys, they've been minorly involved in the story here and there. They deployed that fighting robot that attacked King, that Genos ended up fighting during our first kind of introduction to King. They built the suits that the Hammerhead group stole. Later, they built the other raid suits that the other Hero Association donator sent in on people to rescue his son. And then they built the machine god G5, who became a member of the Monster Association. And basically all we know about them is that they build these things and they deploy them at the behest of some agency, towards some scheme. You know, they talked about analyzing King's battle level. There's something going on. So why I say he's very likely involved in that is mostly because Drive Knight as a solo villain by himself wouldn't be that exciting, right? Like, he's strong, he's cool, he's got all sorts of transformations and stuff, but like, come on, is that really going to be an arc just against Drive Knight? And this is a preview of what our meta story analysis will be. So, but just kind of looking at the in-story evidence then. If this is true, if Drive Knight is the villain and he's working with the organization, it is pretty suspicious that as soon as the organization's G5 robot shows up, Drive Knight is, ugh, I'm out of energy. That all seems quite a coincidence. So, but why would Drive Knight bother telling the executive all these lies if the plan is just to have the robot kill the executive? And I mean, he had been fighting for however long nonstop, and I think we can trust that this is true. It seems like Drive Knight is sincerely fighting against the Monster Association, no matter what other schemes or no matter what other sides he takes. He is out there killing monsters. He did kill Nyan. He does seem to be accurately researching them. And if Drive Knight is down, and this is kind of another plausible explanation for why he coincidentally runs out of power, then Genos can get a fight. Genos can get himself involved in the story and beat up another robot. But again, this is more part 2 type logic. So let's get into that. Let's thoroughly start thinking about this story on more of a meta level. Oops. So the story evidence certainly is inconclusive. So we got to get to the fun part now. Meta story analysis. So I can feel confident in saying, in the future, there will almost certainly be an arc centered around this plot development. And this arc will feature Metal Knight or Drive Knight as a central villain, and the other one as a central hero. It probably will feature the organization. It's quite likely if Drive Knight is the villain, as I said before. And I think it's much less likely if it's Metal Knight, then maybe it doesn't need to be involved, but I think it's still definitely an option. It will certainly involve Genos, because either Drive Knight is telling the truth and Metal Knight is his enemy, or Drive Knight knows about the incident and lied, therefore making him very likely to be Genos' enemy, right? So either way, I think Genos is going to confront this whole situation in his past and be a really major component of this arc. I think it's quite likely that Child Emperor will be involved, just because of his relationship with Dr. Beaufoy, the man behind Metal Knight. It seems like a really good opportunity to involve him in the plot quite a bit. And hopefully Blast will be in there too. They certainly teased us with this possibility, and I'm personally going to be a little disappointed if it doesn't deliver in some regard. I think it's kind of likely because Dr. Beaufoy seems like he's got a long history with the Hero Association, as does Blast. Feels like they've probably crossed paths many times before. I don't know. And tons of robots fighting. Hell yeah, it'll have tons and tons of robots fighting. I'm into that. Okay. So essentially, we have these two possible arcs. The version where Metal Knight is the enemy and the version where Drive Knight is the enemy. And we got to figure out which one of these two would be the most entertaining, the most interesting, the most compelling, and thus the most likely one to actually be made. And in doing this, I'm assuming that we're fans of One and Murata. I'm assuming that we think they do a good job and come up with entertaining stories. If you think, oh, they're probably going to do some boring crap with Drive Knight as the enemy, then the video's logic will not apply to you. So in terms of basic structure, I feel like if the enemy ends up being Drive Knight and this mysterious organization that's full of fighting robots, it's going to end up playing out pretty similar to its Monster Association again, but with robots. On the other hand, if Metal Knight is the enemy, he would have this wide variety of all these established weapons, military technologies and stuff that we're eager to get the full extent of. They're all embedded in the Hero Association and normal society in all sorts of ways that we probably don't even know the half of. He's got tons of information on all the heroes and all their weaknesses already. The dynamic of Beaufoy being in some shadowy, mysterious location and controlling everything remotely, it's just an entirely new sort of threat. that to me just sounds so cool and so different than the sort of challenges we've had before. Beaufoy, I think, also makes a really good counterpoint to Dr. Kusano, that if Genos is going to be heavily involved in this arc, as I think he will be, then it would be kind of nice to have Dr. Kusano also step up, maybe provide some history, maybe get into the action himself. And Beaufoy would be the perfect foil for him, these two elderly, scheming scientists with totally different philosophical viewpoints. I think it would be super sick to see Genos team up with Drive Knight, integrating all of his transforming technology into Genos' own transformations and attacks and stuff. Well, not really transformation, like upgrades. Yeah, that'd be sick. It certainly seems cooler than like a similar team up with Metal Knight. They don't have that like bros dynamic, you know? Whereas like Drive Knight and Genos, you know, like the poster, you can just see the poster immediately. Then again, a fight between Genos and Drive Knight would also be super cool. So, I mean, that could be in the cards too. I really have no idea which of those I'd prefer. So if Drive Knight is the villain, Metal Knight will probably feature in that arc too. As I said before, like, it doesn't just come for free. Like, Metal Knight could just still not care. But it seems like the best opportunity to use him, to have him heavily feature in the story, is an arc where the villain is someone who called him out as being a traitor. So, as I said, like, if he's the villain, oh my god, I'm just disappearing now. If he's the villain, then this happens for free. Of course he's involved in the arc because he's the villain. But if he's the hero, it's like a little more work to come up with a reason for him to be involved in the story, just because of his personality, that he generally avoids situations like this. Not really too much work, though, because he'd want to investigate the organization as a potential for harvesting weapons and stuff for robotics and Drive Knight and all of that stuff. So I don't know. I don't think this is like a strong point either way. Okay, so this I think is a really big one to consider. If Metal Knight is the enemy, then isn't this whole reveal of him being the enemy kind of underwhelming? Like, wouldn't it be way cooler to discover his betrayal through some gigantic, shocking action, like to get back to the Hero Association headquarters, and the missiles attack them, and they're like, oh, what? Like, Metal Knight betrayed us? You know, that kind of shock, I think would be much more effective than just having two characters talking in the street. It really violates this general rule in fiction of show, don't tell. That if you can either just demonstrate something through an action in the story, it's better than having your characters just tell you that that's the case. But then again, in the series, because they have all of these illustrations and hypotheticals and imaginations of what these attacks would look like or who the people are involved, it's still pretty exciting in the series. I think manga and the show don't tell rule is very interesting to me, but that's another topic entirely. On the other hand, though, isn't it kind of weird to have this gigantic, pretty climactic chapter be just someone lying, and that all of the specific details of the story won't actually have any payoff? It all is just what Drive Knight came up with to make people suspicious of Metal Knight. Like, it's just kind of a waste of time. When they showed images of the Metal Knight Assault Force, all of his robots and his weapons and stuff, wouldn't that be a pretty mean tease to not end up delivering with full action involving them, full chapters showing just how strong they are and how cool they are? It would be pretty underwhelming to see them just another hero fighting against the organization or whatever. Like, oh, deploy Metal Knight's tanks. Okay, they're here now. I think it would be way cooler to see our heroes having to deal with them. Then you get a much better extent of just what makes them special. But if they've already given us a little taste of it with these preview images, then maybe they want to do something brand new. Like, maybe this is already too much of a spoiler of what Versus Metal Knight would be. So I think Child Emperor is pretty likely to be involved in this arc, as I said before, because he's got this long history with Dr. Beaufoy. And here we go. Here's my personal pet theory. Child Emperor is a robot built by Beaufoy. Okay? Okay? Hear me out. There's no real evidence of this, but I just kind of think Like, doesn't it explain a lot? And plus, this is a pretty common trope. The mad scientists builds, or not even a mad scientist, but just a scientist builds like a robot son, Mega Man or Astro Boy or Pinocchio to an extent. This trope comes up again and again and again, and it feels like the sort of thing that One Punch Man would like to examine and subvert in some ways. So maybe Child Emperor himself is unaware of this, and this could be a really shocking time to reveal this twist. And this is why he personally doesn't use any robot powers. He just kind of fights with the strength of a child, but then has access to all these weapons and stuff. So there's a scene I can foresee, if this is true, where Child Emperor is defying Beaufoy. Beaufoy activates some remote control thing. Well, if you don't agree with my ideals, you'll still fight for them. Ah, what? I'm a robot! And shooting energy blasts. He's extremely powerful. But then sometime during the intense battle, like when he's got the heroes on the rope, he becomes like a real boy in some sense, exerting agency and control over himself and defying the remote control instructions. Wouldn't that be cool? That would be so cool. It seems so much cooler than if Metal Knight was the good guy and Child Emperor was just another ally throughout the arc. But I mean, we're diving pretty deep into fantasizing here. Of course, I don't know if any of this is true. I just kind of made it all up. But it's fun. Like, I think trying to think about how the story could go in these sorts of really fantastical directions, like, okay, what if Child Emperor was a robot built by Boyfoy, can still kind of be revealing as to what areas of the story seem to have a lot of potential and what areas of the stories would just kind of collapse things down to how they've been before. So, in the end, we can say that this is still pretty inconclusive. But of course it will be. We can never ever be sure of what the mangaka are planning. Even if we can get to the point where we can say, well, only this development makes sense, every other development doesn't make sense, the mangaka could still just do something that doesn't make sense, right? Like, that's kind of just the unfortunate truth of it. We don't know. So what I think the right play in these sort of situations is to really think about what you'd prefer to see happen. Which of these features sounds coolest to you? And then you just hope for that thing to happen. And more than just hope, you try to convince other people that it's likely to happen, that it's possible to happen, that it would be really cool if it happened. Making arguments like this, I think, is really valuable. I mean, really, like, who cares? Even if you think something else is more likely, if you're right, but the result is disappointing, I think that's so much worse than the result being exciting, even if you never saw it coming. And what's absolutely best, of course, is having a pet theory that turns out to be true and it's the coolest thing ever. So why not aim for that? Yeah, that triumph. It's so sweet when you're right and when it's what you want. But really, though, I think the value is either way, whether you're right or wrong, whether it's a cool thing that happens or something you consider lame, the work you did to try to prove that your theory was quote unquote true, I should have put quotes, your theory was true on this metatextual level, the process by which you did that means that you've better appreciated the qualities of the manga that align with your tastes. Like, you're having to analyze now the manga on a level of not just, I like this, but this is how it works. This is why I like this. This is like the line of thinking in the brain of the mangaka that makes the story move in directions that are exciting to me. And I think that then leads to just a better appreciation of the series in general, just allowing you to enjoy the series even more. Like, what more could you want? That's great. Okay, so yeah, here's the conclusion anyways, even though I said it was inconclusive. I think we should trust Drive Knight. So to me, Metal Knight is purported to be much more villainous than Drive Knight in the story. And sure, One Punch Man really famously will subvert our character expectations, but really, more often than not, they don't. If you think about all of the villains throughout One Punch Man, all of the heroes, all of the characters, sure, some of the major ones, some of the most beloved ones, really masterfully subvert what we think of them. Like Saitama himself is a good example. But the vast majority of them actually play perfectly into our expectations. And I think for a central villain of an arc, it's fine to just have a guy that you don't like. It's fine to have a guy that's just kind of callous and wants to seize power selfishly. Like that fits in with kind of a lot of the messaging of the series. But yeah, like I said, especially for arc centerpieces, it's almost impossible to do it entirely subversive. You need kind of major structural elements to fall somewhere where the audience is landing, expecting them to land. So to me, this hypothetical versus Metal Knight arc just seems way sweeter than the hypothetical versus Drive Knight arc. The versus Metal Knight arc, it just sounds so awesome, and I'm really enjoying kind of imagining what it'll be like. It seems like a worthy successor to the Monster Association arc and other arcs in the webcomic. Whereas the versus Drive Knight arc, I don't know. I can't imagine it being that good. It's either going to be him versus the organization, and all we've seen of the organization so far is that all of the stuff they make just kind of gets wrecked. Or they have to pull out like a brand new organization, and that seems very unlikely, or just very strange and arbitrary, in order to like back up Drive Knight. Meh. And yeah, this is mostly because of Metal Knight's unique qualities as a villain. Any other possible villain in the series wouldn't have all of the qualities, all of this intimate knowledge and integration, and the security systems and all the weapons and stuff. Okay, here's the real question though. Now that we've settled this, what is Drive Knight? What is going on? Can we really trust someone who we don't really understand? Is he a regular man using just the transforming suit thing? Is he a cyborg using a transforming suit thing? Is he a remote control android being controlled by some scientist somewhere, just like Metal Knight? Is he an AI android that is making all of these decisions himself? All of the evidence in the story is ambiguous as to all four of these. And when I've asked other people, I've gotten conflicting answers every time. Like, nobody can agree on exactly what Drive Knight is. What's the deal? What's the deal? Okay, that's all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was fun to make. I'd like to continue making videos like this occasionally when I think there's just, I don't know, something worth talking about to this extent. And it seemed like a good idea to talk about some kind of more general questions about analysis and useful analysis techniques. So yeah, all right, that's all for now. Bye-bye.